All right, let's dive into the world of William Shakespeare. I think everyone wants to go beyond just the basic Shakespeare facts, right? And really get into some of the mysteries surrounding his life. And of course, explore why his work is still so relevant even today. Our source material for this deep dive is actually pretty unique. It's like we're eavesdropping on a conversation between two students who are, well, they're fascinated by Shakespeare.
It really is amazing how, even after centuries, Shakespeare's life is still such a puzzle. It's almost like his plays have become so monumental that they've overshadowed the actual person who wrote them.
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder what he was really like. I mean, we know the basics. Like, he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon back in 1564, and that he married Anne Hathaway when he was just 18. But then after that, things get a little hazy. What about those missing years?
Yeah, those missing years are basically a breeding ground for all sorts of theories. Some people even go so far as to question whether Shakespeare actually wrote all those plays. But we'll get into that a bit later. For now, it's important to remember that most scholars do believe Shakespeare was the real author.
Okay, so we've got this guy from a relatively small town with a somewhat mysterious past, and then suddenly he becomes the William Shakespeare. How does that even happen?
Well, if you look at his body of work, it's pretty astonishing. Tragedies, comedies, histories, sonnets.
Wow,
He
yeah.
didn't just stick to one genre. And that probably really helped him appeal to a wider audience back then.
It's true. It's like he had a play for every human emotion. Like, you've got the intense drama and romance of Romeo and Juliet, the power struggles in Macbeth, and then something totally different, like the lightheartedness of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Right, and it wasn't just the quality, it was the quality. Shakespeare was a master of language and storytelling.
As
You really had a knack for tapping into those universal themes that just resonate with people across time and cultures.
I've always been really curious about the connection between Shakespeare's personal life and his plays. Our student sources actually brought up an interesting point. They talked about the death of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet, and how that tragic event might have influenced some of his later works, especially Hamlet.
It's definitely tempting to draw those parallels. Hamlet, of course, is a play just saturated with grief, and it explores the deep psychological impact of losing a father. The play delves into their incredibly complex themes: revenge, justice, and really what it means to confront such a profound loss. It really makes you wonder how much Shakespeare's own personal experience with grief might have shaped the emotional depth of that play.
That connection between personal experience and artistic expression is just fascinating. It's like Shakespeare took his own pain and transformed it into something beautiful and thought-provoking. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a very complex relationship for sure. While it's impossible to know for certain how much of Shakespeare's own life directly influenced his plays, it's clear that his works grapple with these universal human experiences, like loss, love, betrayal, ambition. These themes are timeless, and that's precisely why his plays continue to resonate with audiences, even today.
Speaking of powerful emotions, let's talk about another play that's packed with them, King Lear. This one also deals with family and loss, but in a much different way.
Absolutely. King Lear is a tragedy that really explores the consequences of pride, greed, and the devastating breakdown of family relationships. You have this aging king who decides to divide his kingdom amongst his daughters, which leads to absolute chaos, and ultimately his own downfall. It's really a cautionary tale about the corrupting nature of power and the vital importance of loyalty and love.
It's pretty amazing how Shakespeare could create such different worlds in his plays. I mean, we've talked about the tragedies of Hamlet and King Lear, but then you have something like A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is pure comedy.
Right, and what makes A Midsummer Night's Dream so captivating is how Shakespeare so skillfully blends romance, magic, and humor. It's like you're stepping into this enchanting world full of possibilities, where fairies meddle in the affairs of humans, and love triangles lead to all sorts of hilarious misunderstandings.
And I love how even in his homedies, Shakespeare still manages to explore some pretty deep, meaningful themes. It's like he's suggesting that even in the midst of chaos and absurdity, there's still space for laughter and love.
Absolutely, and it's that ability to find humor, even in the darkest of situations, that makes Shakespeare so relatable. Life is full of its ups and downs, and Shakespeare's comedies remind us that sometimes. The best way to deal with challenges is to just laugh at the absurdity of it all.
It really is incredible how Shakespeare's plays are still so relevant today. I mean, they were written centuries ago. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it all boils down to his profound understanding of human nature. The themes he explored, love, jealousy, ambition, revenge, they're just as powerful now as they were back then.
Yeah, it's like he had this almost uncanny ability to see right through people, to really understand what makes us tick. And I think that insight is what makes his characters feel so real and relatable, even though they're living in these kind of heightened dramatic situations.
Exactly. And that's a big reason why Shakespeare's work continues to be reinterpreted for modern audiences. Like, take 10 Things I Hate About You, for example. It's a teen movie set in a modern high school, but it's actually based on Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's amazing how they took this classic play about gender roles and power dynamics and made it into something that feels fresh and relevant to a younger generation.
What's interesting is that the movie doesn't shy away from the more problematic aspects of the original play. It actually uses the modern setting to comment on those issues in a new way.
I see. And then you have something like The Lion King, which was inspired by Hamlet. Obviously, it's a Disney movie, so it's much more family-friendly. But it still manages to touch on some pretty heavy themes, like betrayal, revenge, and the struggle for power.
Right. The Lion King is a great example of how Shakespeare's stories can be adapted to different genres and mediums, while still preserving their emotional core. It's really fascinating how the story of a prince grappling with his destiny translates so well to the animal kingdom.
It really does make you wonder what Shakespeare would think of all the modern adaptations. Do you think he'd be flattered or maybe a little horrified?
Well, it's hard to say, of course, but knowing his personality, I think he'd be more fascinated than anything. Shakespeare was a man of the theater, after all. He was always experimenting with new ways to tell stories. I bet he'd be thrilled to see his work being reimagined for new generations.
Oh, I'm sure he'd have some notes.
Oh, absolutely. He was a perfectionist, no doubt. But I think ultimately he'd be pleased to see that his plays are still being performed and enjoyed by audiences all over the world.
Yeah, it's a testament to the enduring power of his work, for sure. He really did manage to capture something timeless about the human experience, something that transcends both time and culture.
Absolutely. Speaking of time, there's one final mystery surrounding Shakespeare that we haven't really touched on yet. The circumstances of his death. We know he died in 1616, but the exact cause is still unknown.
Right. Our student sources did mention a few theories, like maybe he died from an illness or perhaps after a wild night out with his fellow writers. It is kind of strange to think that the man who wrote so eloquently about death should have his own death shrouded in mystery.
There's a certain irony there, isn't there? It's like the final act of his life was left unwritten, leaving us to speculate and fill in the blanks.
Which maybe is fitting in a way. It keeps us guessing, keeps us curious, and keeps us coming back to his work with fresh eyes.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. The mystery keeps the magic alive.
So we've explored Shakespeare's life, or at least the glimpses we have of it. We've delved into the incredible range of his plays, both tragic and comedic, and we've seen how his work continues to resonate with audiences centuries later. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? Exploring the world of Shakespeare like this.
It really has. We've uncovered so much. Fascinating insights into his life, the remarkable range of his work, and why his words still hold so much power, even after all these centuries.
You know, it's funny, we started this deep dive talking about all the mystery surrounding Shakespeare's life, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
That's the beauty of Shakespeare, though, isn't it? There's always more to discover, more to unpack, more to ponder.
Our student sources actually ended their discussion with a really interesting question, and I'd love to get your take on it. If you could ask Shakespeare just one question, what would it be?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. I'm torn. Part of me wants to ask about his personal life. You know, did his own experiences really inspire those iconic characters? But then another part of me wants to delve into his creative process. Like, where did those incredible plots and unforgettable lines come from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'd be most curious about his understanding of human nature. How did he manage to create characters that feel so real, so relatable, even after all these years? It's like he had this incredible insight into the human heart, into the things that brave us, both the good and the bad.
I think you've hit on something really crucial there. Shakespeare's ability to capture those complex human emotions, the inner conflicts, the motivations that shape our actions. That's what makes his work so timeless.
It's like he's holding up a mirror to humanity, showing us ourselves in all our flawed glory.
Exactly. And maybe that's why we keep coming back to Shakespeare. We see ourselves reflected in his characters. In their struggles, their triumphs, their failures. We learn from them, we empathize with them. And ultimately, I think we're reminded of our shared humanity.
That's a powerful thought. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of William Shakespeare, I want to leave you with that same question that resonated with me. If you could ask Shakespeare just one question, what would it be?
Yeah.
Let that question linger in your mind as you continue your own exploration of the bard's extraordinary legacy. Until next time, happy reading, happy watching, and happy discovering.